Dungeons and Dragons has come a long way from the 80s cartoon which I watched to the 2000s movie which I didn't watch but I heard was as interesting as a bowl of tripe. The video games which I never played and now its latest incarnation which I have just come from watching.
Dungeons and Dragons.
It's a light-hearted fantasy adventure / comedy. It doesn't take itself seriously and manages to do that without going over the top for the most part. With a runtime of over 2 hours, it's a long ride.
Buckle up for safety, mother.
Now, imagine a fantasy version of Fast and Furious. The setting is medieval and they don't have cars, so they're not so fast, but they are a furious band of thieves. Their leader is all about family and has secrets from his past. The band is motivated by a cause for the greater good and all of them have a wry sense of humor. The leader of the merry band also has a child by a woman now deceased. Also, Michelle Rodriguez plays the same badass, no-nonsense character in both movies. And that's Dungeons and Dragons for you in a nutshell.
Is that it?
Not exactly. It's a little more complex than that.
I hope so.
Okay.
The plot, in as briefly as possible for a 2-hour slog, is as follows. A band of thieves team up with a sorcerer to steal some treasure, which includes a magical tablet that can bring one person back to life. One of the bandits, Forge Fitzwilliams, played by Hugh Grant, double-crosses his team and escapes with the loot and the sorcerer. Before escaping, Forge promises Edgin, played by Chris Pine, that he will take care of his daughter. Holga, played by Michelle Rodriguez, and Edgin spend the next 2 years behind bars for their crimes. They eventually escape and go to look for Edgin's daughter. During their incarceration, Forge Fitzwilliams somehow found a way for himself to be the Lord of Neverwinter. Not too difficult when you consider you've got a whole lot of stolen loot and a powerful sorcerer at hand.
Yeah, no kidding.
Forge is obviously not happy to see his former criminal associates. With a smile on his face, he sends them back to prison. Of course, they escape again, and Edgin comes up with a plan to get his daughter back and relieve Forge of his ill-gotten wealth.
You bring this.
I'm a planner. I make plans.
This plan sees them recruit a less than efficient magician called Simon, played by Justice Smith, a shape-shifting druid named Doric, played by Sophia Lillis, and a paladin named Zenk Yendar, played by Regé-Jean Page. The merry band of misfits go on a mini-quest to retrieve a helmet that will enable their inefficient magician to break the spell that has sealed the vault holding Forge's loot. It eventually turned out that the loot wasn't in the vault to begin with, so that was about an hour of fun and adventure wasted. Wasted though it was, there were some cool scenes, in particular the one with the surprisingly agile yet obese dragon. Anyway, the band get back to Forge's castle where they are caught and forced to take part in the High Sun Games, a shifting maze in which the contestants have to get through without being killed. With the aid of luck and quick thinking, the band of thieves manage to survive the maze and escape. They catch Forge, who is about to run away with Edgin's daughter and his loot. They relieve him of both. The people gathered in the Colosseum watching the High Sun Games are about to be turned into an army of the undead by Forge's sorcerer friend. That had been the plan all along. Forge becomes the Lord of Neverwinter, he gets his loot, gathers all the people together to create the army, and he makes a smooth getaway. The band go back to fight the sorcerer and rescue the people. After a whole lot of fighting, creative magic, and quick thinking, the band defeat the sorcerer. Her name was Safina, by the way, and she was played by Daisy Head. You may recognize her from Shadow and Bone. Talk about a makeover. In the end, Safina is defeated, Forge is arrested, and the band live happily ever after. No, wait. Before they lived happily ever after, Holga died. Yes, the fearless warrior died. Predictably, Edgin used the magical tablet he had been after the whole time to bring Holga back to life instead of his wife. And then they all lived happily ever after.
Fairy tale ending.
The movie doesn't take itself seriously, so I suppose it could be spared an intense grilling. But then again, with a budget of 150 million big ones, you'd think someone was paid well enough to make sure the plot was solid. I could ask about the magical tablet that Edgin risked everything for. Why wasn't anyone else interested in it? Surely something that can bring back a dead person would be priceless and hunted for by all and sundry. Also, the few undead that were created at the Colosseum What happened to them? Wouldn't Safina have used them to help her fight Edgin and his band of thieves in the final showdown? But then again, that's maybe being a bit pedantic. I will say that it was nice to see the cast of the original cartoon get a cameo appearance. Also, the entire cast put in solid performances worthy of a big budget movie. However, it was a bit weird seeing Michelle Rodriguez in the scenes with her ex-boyfriend who was literally half her size. How does that work?
Elementary, my dear Holmes. Elementary.
There is definitely enough left hanging for a sequel, such as Ford was arrested so he can predictably make a comeback in the next one. Edgin's daughter, Kira, is a whole character that can be explored and developed in another movie. This is true for most of the characters too, so I can definitely see a sequel on the horizon, especially given its promising start at the box office. We all know that where there's money, there's a sequel around the corner. All things considered, Dungeons & Dragons is a decent movie and worth a watch. This critic gives it a solid 3 gold stars. And that's all for now. And remember, until next time,
I'll be back.